Have you ever paused and really thought about what's in the food you're eating? I mean, beyond what's on the nutrition label. Today, we're going to peel back that label and take a hard look at the unseen and, let's be honest, sometimes pretty unsettling ingredients that might just be hiding in your meal.
So yeah, what is really hiding in your food? It sounds like a simple question, right? But the answer, well, it's way more complex and frankly, a little disturbing. Because the truth is, what you think you're buying isn't always what you're getting. Just take a look at this. On the left, you've got your standard chili powder, and on the right, that's finely ground brick powder. Can you tell the difference? Probably not. They look almost identical to the naked eye. And this right here is a real and pretty shocking example of what food adulteration looks like. It just goes to show how easy it is for us to be fooled.
Okay, so let's get a really clear handle on what we're actually talking about here. This isn't just about, finding a stray hair in your soup. This is a much bigger, much more systematic problem.
So what is food adulteration officially? Well, it's basically the act of cheating. It's when someone intentionally lowers the quality of a food. That could mean adding something inferior or even harmful, like that brick powder we just saw. Or it could mean taking valuable stuff out, like nutrients, just to cut costs. Either way, the end result is the same. The food becomes less safe, less nutritious, and a total ripoff.
But that just begs the question, right? Why would anyone even do this? What could possibly be the motivation for putting people's health at risk? Well, you can probably guess. It almost always comes down to one thing: money. And the reasons are actually pretty varied. It's not always as dramatic as adding poison. Sometimes it's as simple as adding water to milk to increase the volume and sell less for more. Or maybe using cheap artificial dyes to make fruits and veggies look way fresher than they actually are. The goal is always to trick you into thinking you're getting something you're not, all for a bigger profit.
And you gotta understand, this isn't just a case of a few bad apples. It's a systemic issue. I mean, look at this. Sure, economic pressure is the biggest driver at 40%, but weak legal enforcement, low consumer awareness, and messy, complicated supply chains, where your food passes through so many hands it's impossible to track, all of that creates the perfect storm for this kind of thing to happen.
Now, the ways that food can be messed with are incredibly creative, in a bad way. So, to really wrap our heads around the problem, we need to break it down. Let's look at the different faces of this deceit. So, experts usually break adulteration down into these 6 main types. Now, they all pose a risk, but for now, let's just zoom in on a few of the most common and, frankly, most concerning categories to see how this stuff actually plays out in the food we buy every day. First up, you have intentional adulteration. This one is exactly what it sounds like. It's done on purpose, knowingly, for one reason and one reason only: financial gain. This is the sawdust mixed into spices to make them heavier, or cheap oils being passed off as expensive ones. Let's call it what it is. It's deliberate fraud. Then you've got incidental adulteration. Now this is different. This happens by accident, usually because of carelessness or just plain unhygienic conditions somewhere along the supply chain. We're talking about things like pesticide residues that weren't washed off of vegetables or contamination from pests while grains are in storage. It's not malicious, but it is still a huge health concern. And that brings us to one of the scariest types: chemical adulteration. This is the deliberate use of harmful, non-food chemicals to change how a food looks or feels. For example, using a chemical called calcium carbide, which is an industrial chemical, to make fruits ripen way faster than they should. Or, and this is wild, adding actual detergent to milk to make it seem thicker and frothy. And the consequences of consuming this stuff can be really, really severe. You have the immediate acute effects we all think of, food poisoning, nausea, that kind of thing. But it's the chronic, long-term effects from repeated exposure that are truly terrifying. We're talking about permanent liver and kidney damage, nervous system disorders, and even cancer. This is why this issue is so critical. Okay, so let's bring this out of the world of theory and right into our own homes. Where are these dangers actually hiding? You might be surprised to learn they could be in some of the most basic items in your kitchen pantry. And we're going to start with a staple for so many families: milk. Unfortunately, because it's a liquid, it also happens to be one of the easiest and most common products to tamper with. Now, just adding water is the most common trick, simply to bulk up the volume, but the deception goes so much deeper. Think about this. Detergent is added to create a fake froth. Urea, which is a key component in fertilizer, is added to make milk look whiter and last longer. Starch is thrown in to give it a thicker, richer consistency. These are chemicals that have absolutely no business being anywhere near our food.
All right, let's move from the fridge over to the spice rack. Because spices are almost always sold in powdered form, they are extremely vulnerable to being mixed with cheaper substances that look the same.
And here we are, full circle back to our first example. Brick powder and sawdust are common additives just to add weight. Potentially toxic artificial colors are sometimes used to make things like turmeric or chili powder look extra vibrant. People have even found used, dried-out tea leaves mixed back in with fresh tea to bulk it up. It's just endless.
Okay, I know, this has all been pretty alarming to hear. But the good news is, we are not helpless here. Fighting back against this requires a team effort. From the government, from the industry, and yes, right down to us, the consumer. First off, governments have a huge role to play. And that means more than just having food safety laws on the books. It means actually strictly enforcing them. That takes regular, unannounced inspections of food producers, real penalties for violators, and a strong network of labs that can test products right off the shelf.
Of course, the food industry itself has to step up in a big way. This means adopting what are called good manufacturing practices and implementing real safety checks throughout their entire process. But more than anything, it means a fundamental commitment to ethical standards that puts our health above their profits. And finally, there's our role. As consumers, our vigilance is actually one of the most powerful tools we have. It all starts with being aware. You have to scrutinize labels and check those expiry dates. Trust your gut. If something looks, smells, or tastes off, don't buy it. If a price seems way too good to be true, it probably is. And please, report suspicious products. Your one action could end up protecting a lot of other people.
You know, this quote really just says it all, doesn't it? Protecting our food is a shared duty. It's a legal responsibility for the people in charge, for sure. But it's also a moral obligation for every single one of us to make sure the food we eat is safe, pure, and actually nourishing.
At the end of the day, food is supposed to be our fuel. It's meant to give us health and energy. It should never be a gamble that we take with every single meal. Real change starts with awareness, and it grows when we all start to demand better standards. So the real question is, now that you know, are you ready to demand better?